Salutations, respected viewers. In this video, I'm going to examine Mr. Steven Crowder's views on coal. Now, you have probably heard of Steven Crowder if you're watching this video. He's an American shock jock. He's based in Texas, though born in Canada. An immigrant to the United States, you might say, although I think actually one of his parents is Canadian, the other's American. Anyhow, he's very convivial, and politics aside, he's the sort of person I'm sure I'd get on very well with in person, and would be fun to spend time around. So he's one of the most engaging, popular, right-wing American radio hosts. He doesn't interview people so much as in broadcast his opinions. But he took issue with something that John Oliver said on his show. John Oliver is a British expatriate in the United States, been broadcasting there for about 20 years, although I think he's not become a citizen at that time. He's from Birmingham, John Oliver, so speaks with that Brummie accent. So Crowder often does these broadcasts where he tries to dismantle what Oliver is saying and prove that what Mr. Oliver is saying is bogus, and sometimes he has a measure of success in doing that. So John Oliver, well, he comes from a coal-producing region of the UK, or quite close to Birmingham. It was the Black Country, so called because of the black coal. John Oliver is a left-wing. I don't know quite his party identification, but it's worth knowing that Labour Party supporters in the United Kingdom, left-wingers, they tended to really look up to coal miners as horny-handed sons of toil, as really the salt of the earth. Courageous people, the clearest example of the exploited toiling classes, that there was sweated labour, had to do everything for coal miners. But anyway, there's not much coal mining in the UK these days. But coal is bad for the environment. And Steven Crowder suggested it wasn't, saying, based on what? Challenging John Oliver's assertion that burning coal is injurious to the environment and to people's health. Well, it's disappointing that I should have to explain this to someone like Mr. Crowder. Well, burning too much coal kills people. I mean, burning one lump of coal is not going to kill one person, but obviously millions of tons of it, they add up to harmful emissions in the atmosphere, and that does kill people. So those who've got respiratory conditions, those therefore got a propensity to all sorts of breathing problems, to lung issues, they're going to be killed by it. So it's not quite as simple as this immediately kills you, it builds up. Now let's look at what the United States government has to say about it, the Environmental Protection Agency. And they say that burning coal kills 24,000 Americans a year. So it might be a contributory factor rather than outright killing them. But all right, there are other people whose health will be damaged by burning coal, which is not to say that it shouldn't be burnt at all. We've got to burn something. We need some sort of energy. Burning oil does some of the same, but coal is the dirtiest of all. You know, every fuel has its downsides, but I won't go into them all. The time is to concentrate on coal. So fly ash, bottom ash, they come off coal. They're harmful. Thorium, arsenic, uranium, mercury, can be mad as a hatter. Remember that from Alice in Wonderland? Exposure to that affects people's mental health. Now, if these are tiny, tiny amounts, it's not going to harm someone significantly. But the more coal is burnt, then the greater the damage is done to a person's health. There's coal dust getting into people's lungs. You can get coal lung, which is bad for miners, which is why people who worked in coal mines for a long time, they often suffer poor health. So if you work in colliery, that's an occupational hazard. So it's beyond argument that burning coal is bad for the environment and is bad for people's health. How much coal should be burnt? What's an acceptable level of risk? What's an acceptable level of environmental degradation? How much harm to public health are we willing to put up with for the sake of cheaper fuel? All right, it's something we could debate all day, but we've got to start from the premise that burning coal does damage the environment and public's health. What level should we do this to? Well, that's a moot point. Then there's slag heaps from coal, which obviously is an eyesore. It's scarification on the face of the land. Open cast mining obviously is unsightly, but you might say, hey, well, that's worth it because poverty is worse. Water can be polluted by coal. So people talk about clean coal. Now, it's, again, hilarious irony that Steven Crowder should be on the same side as Arthur Scargill on this debate. I'm sure he's never heard of Arthur Scargill, who's about 80 now. Arthur Scargill was the leader of the British Miners' Trades Union in the 70s and 80s, a member of the Communist Party on the committee of the British Communist Party at the age of 16, an outspoken admirer of Stalin and defender of his reputation. So not quite Mr. Crowder's cup of char, nor mine, I hasten to emphasise. And Scargill said, oh, we can bring back coal. It doesn't have to be having a deleterious effect on public health or ruining the environment. Carbon capture, that's only semi-effective when you burn it, carbon capture in the chimneys. So coal is at least 10 times more toxic than burning natural gas, at least 10 times. By some estimates, it's 100 times more harmful. So coal miners are killed in collapses. Now, you could say they choose to do it, so you take the risk, and it's often relatively well paid for a blue-collar job. And I'm someone who's quite broad-minded about the sort of risk that people should accept, and I don't believe in mollycoddling people too much or banning things very much. So it's just a factor to take into consideration. There are greenhouse gases that are emitted, carbon dioxide. Now, I know there's CO2 emissions from everything that's burnt, but coal is the biggest polluter per tonne of coal. There's more of that than there is from anything else. And indeed, in French, coal is simply called carbone, and there's an obvious reason for that. So, and then Mr. Crowder, he made this completely erroneous statement saying that Germany had given up coal altogether. It definitely uses it. Now, Germany manages to get 29% of its energy from renewable sources, which is really enviable. The United Kingdom is more like 2%. Republic of Ireland, we're pretty low as well. Denmark's got actually quite a credible record on that. I might come back to the Denmark example later. So Germany uses plenty of coal and lignite. In case you don't know what that is, it's commonly called brown coal. Now, there are various grades of coal, as in the quality of them, how much fuel you get from burning a ton of it, and how polluting it is. Now, coal from places like Poland and the Czech Republic tends to pollute to a greater degree, which is no reflection on the Poles or the Czechs. They're just unlucky about the quality of coal they have. Coal in some other parts of the world is generally purer, or generally doesn't give off so much carbon. There's less pollution for, how many kilowatt hours you're going to get from burning a ton of it. So Mr. Crowder strikes me as someone who desperately casts around for information he could use against environmentalism. He is eager to put the unkindest possible interpretation on environmentalism. Oh, it's all a hoax, it's a plot, it's just because they're anti-capitalist or they're self-loathing or they want to ruin the coal industry or whatever, rather than say, let's dispassionately examine the evidence and accept a datum we don't like, anyway, as well as other data that we do like. So air quality, the Clean Air Act, isn't that a good thing? And I know that this gentleman's not completely opposed to regulation, he said so. And if we had a growing economy, a very fast-growing economy, that wouldn't be much good if huge numbers of people were dying of, coal-burning related diseases. 24,000 people a year in the United States. Is that an acceptably low number? I have my doubts. I mean, you could make it zero, but I think that the damage to the economy would just be too great. Other people say, no, come on, dead is forever, we must do absolutely everything we can. And it's fascinating to note when it comes to something like terrorism, for Mr. Crowder, there's almost no hold barred, that in terms of money should be spent, in terms of spying on people, whatever should be done to root that out, to try and get the death toll down to zero. But when it comes to something like coal, oh well, that's not actually shooting people, so it doesn't matter. Whereas it comes to, say, guns, well, there should be no limitations whatsoever on guns, according to him, I don't think. So why does Mr. Crowder, why does he advance this line that coal is not damaging the environment and does not harm a person's health? Well, perhaps there's a lot of people who work in the coal industry, a lot of people who work in oil and so forth, they watch Crowder, and they're the anti-environmental lobby. I wonder who his sponsors are. It might have something to do with that. I was speculating there. And he said, well, we've got to use our own coal. We don't want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. Well, the United States has only been doing that since the 60s. You buy loads of oil from Saudi Arabia. And as you're an inveterate advocate for Trump, you might know that Trump adores the Saudi Arabian government. He keeps banging on about how he loves them, how they pay him so much money, how he danced with the king of Saudi Arabia and all the rest of it. So if you think Saudi Arabia is so evil, you should loathe Trump, who's got nothing but nice things to say about the Saudi tyrants. We don't want to buy coal from Asia. Mr. Crowder ought to open an outlet Saudi Arabia is in Asia, right? Some of the Middle East is in Asia, including Saudi Arabia. Some of the Middle East is in North Africa, arguably even Southeast Europe, Turkey, if you count it as Europe or Asia, or both. But Mr. Crowder needs to inform himself more. So big oil, big coal, special interests have a vested interest in making people believe that carbon emissions don't harm the environment, that coal doesn't ruin people's health, things like that. So the United States is almost uniquely well endowed when it comes to renewable energy, because it's got the third largest land area in the world. It's got a staggering potential for hydroelectricity, so many mighty rivers flowing very fast. Think of all that you could get. I mean, obviously there have been hydroelectric dams there since the 1930s, but it could get a lot better. Geothermal energy from active volcanoes, and on and on. Solar power, because the more land you have, the more sunshine you can capture. We've got some very sunny areas. Southern California, over 300 days of sunshine per year. Even in snowy places, the sun is often shining. You often have clear skies, even if it's minus 30. It doesn't have to be warm, it just has to be sunny. Wind power, wave power, because of these enormous coastlines the United States has. So the biomass, Mr. Crowder, he likes the farmers. Farmers are often Republicans. These rural whites, they would agree with him on most things. You know, is he against subsidies for them? Possibly he is. No need to have subsidies. No handouts. That's socialism. That's the way he would see it. But because of biomass, they could be producing plants which are burnt, and that would produce a lot of fuel. Burning rubbish, that would help as well. So there are many ways for the United States to improve its energy situation. Energy efficiency, smaller houses. Oh, horror of horrors, but having to live less well. Well, really just rampant consumerism makes people think they want more. So this is prosperity gospel, the idea that wealth is virtue, and therefore poverty is vice, the undeserving poor. In fairness, sometimes people are undeserving, and they've made bad choices. So poor choices make you poor. That's the idea. And sometimes it's drug addiction and alcoholism and idleness and all the rest of it. Okay, but there's some people who are poor despite being very hardworking, and they're just not very talented or just being unlucky in life. So having wealth doesn't mean you're a good person or virtuous. Just people are a bit show-offy about the size of their houses. Smaller houses, certainly more thermal insulation, more energy efficient houses, double glazing for the winter, and not wearing so many clothes when it's too hot. I know some people in very hot parts of the United States wearing proper suits in offices, so the AC has to be up very high. Allow them to wear more casual clothes. In Australia, that they wear these sort of Airtex shirts and shorts to business meetings, because that's a sensible way to dress for the environment, and therefore they don't have to use so much AC. More public transport, smaller cars as well as fewer cars. You're not a big man because you have a big car. Someone's small or feeble or contemptible because they have a small car. Now, they say, well, you know what they say about men with big cars? Well, even if a man is overcompensating, having a micro penis is nothing to be ashamed of. It wouldn't reflect badly on this man. It's just so childish to think that we should have disdain for people like that. So this disbelief in global warming appears to be a shibboleth for the American right, and it's troubling. So some people are deeply invested in this belief, and nothing will disconfirm it for them. So people like Mr. Crowder are desperate to concoct a pro-coal argument, no matter how flimsy the evidence. And Trump saying beautiful, clean coal. Well, Trump is not known for his wonderful taste. I never heard of anyone who thought coal is beautiful or that it's clean. Well, you know, that took some chutzpah. So it's irrefragable that coal is bad for the environment. How bad? There are different grades of coal. So there's a certain creed of Republican beliefs in the United States. It's almost like the catechism they learn. This is the issue. What's our answer? And you could go through that on guns, abortion, tax, defense, Muslims, immigration, healthcare, college funding, feminism, on and on and on. And actually, I would agree with a few points on that checklist. But Crowder is striving to cobble together arguments against green energy. And there are big subsidies to it. Yes, it is expensive because it's a relatively new energy. We're kind of in the experimental stage of it. But we've got to say, is it worth it? Are things worth paying for? I think they are. Now, obviously, we're in no position to get rid of hydrocarbons yet. But we can do other things, you know, use a lot more renewable energy and be more energy efficient as well. The thing is, one day coal will run out. oil will run out, gas will run out. So when all those hydrocarbons are gone, what are you going to do? We're going to have to change to renewables eventually. It's a matter of time. It might be 50 years, it might be 2,000 years, we don't know, but it's going to happen. And if it happens sooner, well, then we better be ready. So renewables are not all bad, and they will not run out. That's why they're called renewables. So long as the wind blows, so long as the waves come in and out with the tide, so long as rivers flow, so long as the sun shines for millions and millions of years, it's going to be there. Because once we get it cracked, once we have an efficient way to do it, a cost-effective way to do it, that's it. The maintenance costs will be low. So it'll be a gift that keeps on giving. No more oil slicks, no more huge fires from oil refineries when things blow up, and no more dependency on the Middle East. I'm sure Mr. Crowder would like that. Look at Norway, 90% renewable. It works. 90% renewable. It's staggering. This is an oil-rich country. A bit hypocritical, you might say, because they export most of their oil. They got plenty of it. So yes, it's very doable. You can still have a very high standard of living, and that is the way forward.